Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. This is Susan Ryan. I am the Senior Director of the Greenhouse Project, and I am delighted you have joined us this afternoon. This is an incredible webinar, an incredible speaker, but before I go there, I've got a few housekeeping announcements and want to talk to you about our symposium. Housekeeping-wise, you are in listen-only mode. That means that your phones are muted, but at the end, there will be an opportunity for you to type a question in the chat box for you to ask our speaker today. So I really want you to take advantage of that feature so that you can make sure you get your questions answered. The second thing is I want to let you know about our first ever dementia symposium, Beyond Memory Care, a dementia well-being approach. We are really grateful that Dr. Al Power will be with us to kind of be our convener. He will be the main speaker, but he is joined as well by our webinar speaker today. So I'm going to get us right over to our webinar because this speaker is really an amazing person. I always say as we were waiting for the webinar to start today, I'm always so amazed at the accolades that this woman has achieved. When you get Oprah, Dr. Oz, and Maria Shriver all providing a level of accolades to a person, you have to say, wow, this person has a little bit going on. This is Lori LeBay. She is a passionate speaker and advocate and the founder of Alzheimer's Speaks. Now, this is somebody who's walked the journey as she supported her mom who had dementia. And Laurie was somebody who really, instead of kind of complaining or having kind of a negative spin, she really sought solutions. And she created some very creative things such as dementia-friendly communities, memory cafes, and I think the other thing is she took her insights and really created support for family members and care partners. The title today is From Crisis to Comfort, Shifting Dementia Care by Giving to All. So I really want to get out of the way, Lori, and turn it over to you so that we can spend the next few minutes with you. So Lori, thanks so much for being willing to be with us today.
Well, thanks for having me, and hello everybody. I am so excited to be talking with you today, and I hope you walk away filled with energy and hope and a ton of ideas to be able to move along. And for some reason, oh, there we go. My screen wasn't moving there. I wanted to kind of start out and talk a little bit about families and how we deal with them and how we deal with our staff, because everybody is a little stressed right now in multiple ways, and families especially come in just loaded for bear when they have to place a loved one. And so I want to give a little understanding and open up the doors to us looking at the perceptions of our roles and the roles of families, because I think it's absolutely critical, and how we adjust to the new normal. Now, we know that dementia isn't normal aging, but it is a new normal, and we have to be starting to embrace that this is part of, you know, what is. It's like cancer and heart disease and diabetes and AIDS and all the other things that we have learned to adjust and live our lives fully with. And this is another thing that we have to adapt to, and we have to teach families as well that it's okay that this is a new normal, that they're not alone, because aging and dementia are two things that we cannot control. Dementia is a disease of society. It's not a disease of one, and that's one of the things that always drove me crazy when I was dealing with my mom and walking alongside her during her 30 years of living with dementia. Is I would hear these statistics that every person with dementia affects 6 or 7 people. We have to stop that. Dementia affects our families, which are typically larger than 6 or 7 people. They have friends, they have coworkers, they have neighbors, they're on committees. This is a disease that we really have to take a closer look at and realize that a case of dementia is popping up every 3 seconds somewhere in the world. Another thing that I think is good for family and staff alike to know, that this isn't happening just in their neighborhood, just in their family, just in their city, just in their state, but the whole world is dealing with this. And so we have to learn to be a little bit more gracious. As a society, we have to learn to be more accepted, find more acceptance, and to bring leadership to the table so that we can help people through this. We need to give out more resources so people have more choices, and we have to do that in safe environments where people feel comfortable gathering that information and seeing us as an educational tool and support in all levels, from medical, financial, emotional, physical, every aspect of their life. We need to support that. We need to educate them. So let's look at how families look at dementia and how their world starts out in this. Typically, when they see symptoms, and this isn't anything new, but again, it's all about bringing it into perspective, because sometimes we get stuck in our rut, and because we're so used to dealing with this, we forget the emotional impact that these processes have on a family. So when they have symptoms, they go to the doctor, and most of us think, well, we'll go to the doctor because the doctor's going to have all the answers. They don't. And they don't give out a whole lot of hope, and they don't give out a whole lot of resources. Typically, when they go in, they get a medication, they get a next appointment. If they're lucky, they'll get a number to the Alzheimer's Association, and then they're told to get their affairs in order. They're told to plan for the end. That's not uplifting. That's not giving a lot of hope. And people are pretty depressed, and they're scared. They don't know what to do. So they hop on the computer, they go to Google, and if they weren't scared before, now the bejesus is scared out of them. And so again, we as professionals need to put out a hand and help them, because they are just hanging on for a ride. They don't know what the next turn or hill or curve is going to bring into their life. All they know is nothing is the same. They've also been taught, because this is how we have marketed for years, we have marketed with fear. And this is a picture of my mom in her end stages. She lived about 4 years in her end stages. And here you can see her with that blank stare. And people would refer to that blank stare as a shell of a body. And we need to let people know that that shell of a body that they're seeing still has this bright, spirited soul on the inside. We have to teach them to look for different signs and different signals, which we'll talk about in a little bit. We have to understand that families believe that they are not only paying for placement and services, but they expect help from you. They expect guidance from you. And, you know, if we're not marketing that, if we are not lifting them up, if we're not communicating, we are going to be in conflict with them right off the bat. So we have to look at things differently. We have to do things differently. And we have to teach people to walk an authentic path. We have to teach them how to communicate, how to connect, and how to collaborate. And that is both staff and families. Now you can look at this picture, and I call it a living memorial of my mom. And you might say, oh my gosh, that woman's had a lot of bad hair days. But you know what? How many of us have had bad hair days but have still had joyful moments? What we look like does not reflect quality of life. And that is something that really, really needs to change, because so often we are propping our residents up to make them appear to be something that doesn't really matter to them anymore. And it's taking away their joy and their comfort. And I'll give you an example of this a little bit later in the program. We have to understand that families are complicated. All of them are the same, and every person can go from rage to compassion and sadness to I'm not talking to you, to very loving. And that can be different roles of family members, or it could be one person just feeling all these emotions, because all of us have them. Families are complicated, and yet families are much like staff. We all have histories, we all have different roles, and we all have different expectations. But one of the things that makes staff and family a little bit different at times is the broken promise. Families often promise they're not going to do something. And a promise means everything until it's broken. And then a sorry means nothing. So many of our families have promised no strangers will come into your home, no health care. I'm not going to move him out of his house. And then all of a sudden they are. There's this anger, there's this guilt, there's a depression, there's confusion, there's a lot of times conflict within the family on many levels, which can arise from even work schedules and finances and what are the needs. They're not always on the same page. So finding balance for those families is critical. And that is something we can all help with if we have an open communication, if we're willing to educate them, if we're willing to work collaboratively with them. We can help them release some of their guilt. We can help them be more forgiving, because we have all experienced that inner critic that talks in our ear and tells us we're not doing a good job, or we're not doing enough, or we could be better. And that voice is constantly talking in their head. They feel like they've let somebody down. We have to give them the faith that they're going to get through this, and their person, their loved one, is going to have a quality of life. So now let's look at how staff react to dementia. The biggest difference between staff and families is, for staff, it's a job. They don't have to worry about being there around the clock, and they get paid. But sometimes staff unknowingly judge families, and it can be really, really subtle, because we have not taught people to consciously care. It can be the roll of the eyes, it can be the tone of the voice, it could be maybe a little gossip and a little elbow nudge, or it could be downright avoidance. Again, families, who are they, and who do you avoid? Who are your staff avoiding? Because it happens. And if you don't think it happens, I challenge you to look deeper, because I travel all around the country, and when people feel safe, they talk about these issues of, oh, so-and-so's coming in, and one staff person in particular might just, not get along with them really well, or they're always being attacked by that family member. Why is that happening? It's happening because families go into a protection mode. When they place a loved one, they are, again, they've broken that promise typically. They're scared to death that they've picked the right place. They're not sure that you are going to get their loved one, that you're going to be able to care and know their needs the way they do. And so they go into protection mode, which means every time they come and visit, they are going to look for problems, because you can't fix what's broken if you don't look for the problems. And so this is an example where somebody might have just come in, and maybe the bed was made, housekeeping just left, everything was fine, and then mom or dad decided to jump in bed, rip it apart. Family walks in and goes, "This is ridiculous. You have told me over and over that housekeeping is here." It's apparent they're not, because they're seeing it from a different view and they're not understanding what's happening. And so these are how conflicts start with families and staff. We have to understand we get frustrated, and so do they. And so we really are very much more alike than different, but it's how do we deal with that frustrations? And again, families react the same way we do. So how do we de-escalate some of this stuff? Well, one of the things we can teach our staff, and we can teach families, is how to breathe. Now you can go, oh, come on, we've all been doing that. I'm 60, I've been doing it for 60 years. So I got this down. What are you telling me I have to breathe? It's breathing in a proper fashion to be able to change your body chemistry and take 10, 11 deep breaths. And on the inhale, ask your higher power, if you don't believe in one, ask yourself to give you whatever you need in that moment. And on the exhale, You ask for all the toxins in your mind, body, and soul to leave so you can have a clear head so you can think. Now, if you grew up when I did, you might have had a parent that said, don't react, count to 10. They were saying count to 10 because you need to get grounded. You can't just fly off the handle. And breathing deeply not only gives you that time to regroup, but it actually makes a chemical difference in your body to calm you down. So we have to think about what, when, where, how, and why we communicate with families. And so often we are calling them because a med got screwed up. Something is missing. Somebody got hurt. These aren't positive things. And then we wonder why families look at the phone and go, oh, I don't know if I can answer that right now. I don't know if I can deal with that right now. So they are having the same reaction some of our staff are having when they hear or they get a call from a family member. So we have to get our staff to think, how would they like to be communicated to if they had a loved one? So what I call family by choice is making sure that staff are part of the family. They're supporting families. They're not taking over, they're not taking away, and they're not replacing them. And I can tell you, I ran into that at times, and I was there a lot with my mom. But I would hear comments about other families or even my siblings about why aren't they here? You know, your mom's such a great person. Why aren't they showing up? And there was this judgment. And I think staff thought they were supporting me. And in some ways they were, but it also gave me a message of what they thought of others. And that takes away from relationships. So we have to understand how those stigmas, how those comments can impact our care, because stigmas set up false expectations. And we have been trained for years and years and years that aging and illness is bad. And we're still fighting it with all of our anti-wrinkle creams and our different regimes, but it's going to happen. We're going to age, and most likely we are going to get ill at some point. And we're going to have to learn how to adapt to that. So think about this. When family and staff believe that a person with dementia doesn't know, that they're not capable, and that their visits and their engagement doesn't matter, and I apologize on that typo there, people diagnosed with dementia then believe they don't know, they're not capable, and they're not worthy of visits. Think what that must feel like. So what do you want your dementia care culture to look like? Imagine just for a moment, take a deep breath and just imagine if your dementia care culture was calm and comfortable for residents and staff and families. Would this impact your staff, your residents, and families? Of course it would. How would you personally feel about getting up and going to work if you knew it was going to be calm and comfortable, that you weren't going to be dealing with crisis? How would you feel while you were at your job? How would you feel about even when it's time to go home? It wouldn't be running to escape. If it makes a difference to you, it's going to make a difference to your staff, your residents, your families, and your budgets. Is your dementia care culture something that you really consciously believe you want your company to have? Is it something that can be developed and can be something that is progressive and constantly growing? There's not a standard, I don't think, that we should hit. I think we should always believe that we can improve. And we do that by consciously caring. We do that by little things that don't cost us any money, like changing the words that we use. Now, and phrases, like this phrase drives me crazy. Well, we've always done it this way. How many of you have heard that when you're trying to push something new through? Many of the people who are telling you we've always done it this way have no idea why it's been done that way. That's just what they were told when they came on the job. This needs to be reevaluated if you're going to go to the next level. We should always be open to new ideas. It shouldn't be, we've always done it this way. It should be, well, we've done it this way, but what are the benefits of doing it this way, of what you're suggesting? Being open to opportunities. We need to change our verbiage to change expectations and outcomes. For example, the word caregiver, we wonder why caregivers are burnt out because it tells them they're giving everything away. By changing to the words care partner or care companion, we become relationship based. One of the phrases I personally would like to see kicked to the curb is person-centered care. And I know a lot of you use that out there, but I can tell you by going around the country, most people think it is overused and underdelivered, and it doesn't specify what you're really doing to, especially the layman, to the family members, and a lot of times to our staff. Relationship-based care, or what the greenhouse uses, relationship-rich care, says we're in this together. This isn't something that I'm dictating to you. This is something that we are doing together. It's not about fixing people, it's about supporting people. And there's a huge difference. Think about being in a relationship where somebody wants to fix you. They want to change you so you meet their needs. That's a whole lot different than being in a relationship with someone who supports you and allows you to be you. We have to stop disempowering people and empowering them to still participate, maybe differently than what they did before, but they are still active and engaged and feel purposeful. I love a child's focus because a child focuses on commonalities, not differences. And I'll give you an example here. My mom, not my mom, my daughter, when she was in kindergarten, my husband and I went to her conference. And her teacher said, "Oh, you have such a special child." And I said, "Oh, really? That's so nice to hear, but what makes you say that?" And she said, "Oh, she's so compassionate. We have a little boy in a wheelchair, and she's always right there to help him get from A to B wherever we're going. There's another child over here that, she's just a little slower, and Danielle is just always right there helping Audrey out." And I started laughing. And the teacher said, "Well, what are you laughing for?" I said, "My child's not special." She's like, "Yes, she's very special." And I said, "No, she's not special. She was not taught to look for differences. She just sees another kid to play with." And that's where we need to get in dementia care. We need to get that engagement of we can still have meaningful relationships no matter what is in front of us. If there's one word out of all of these I'd like you to get rid of, it's this one: behavior. Think about it. When someone has told you you have a behavior, how do you feel? It's not good. It's like stand in the corner, time out time. If it was a good thing, you're told it's a skill. It's not a behavior. So think of the poor people with dementia and how many times they are told they have a bad behavior. And they might not be told it directly, but they're hearing it when staff talk, when family talk. You see, a behavior is just a reaction. It's a signal. It's a clue for us with our cognitive abilities to figure out what's wrong. They're trying to tell us something's not right because it's not normal for people to want to upset the apple cart. People want to belong. They don't want to distance typically themselves. So it's all about the why. What is behind that reaction, that clue, that signal? And I use what I call the reaction equation, which I believe every person uses. And it's really simple. It's what is their current attitude plus our past experiences. That creates their perceptions. And then our perceptions trigger our reactions. And if we can step back and take a little bit of time, we can usually figure this out. So why would a resident gather all of the silverware and the napkins up every night at dinner? Well, I was at the nursing home that my mom happened to be in. And this one evening, there was a little woman, and she, every night, the staff would get the table set and she would rip them apart again. And I could see the anger in the staff. They were really frustrated, even though they were trying not to be, at this poor little lady. And I said, do you mind if I just take her for a walk? So I asked her if she'd go for a walk with me, and she did. And we talked, and she was so mad at the staff. You could see the friction between them. And by the time we walked around and came back, she had a smile on her face, and she sat down for dinner, which they said she won't eat dinner because it wasn't a comfortable environment. Well, what I found out that she wanted to do was she wanted to roll the silverware. She wanted to be purposeful. Her family had owned a restaurant, but nobody took the time to find out what was causing that reaction. There was a purpose behind it. So sometimes we have to slow down. We have to reframe things like shadowing. How often do staff and family go crazy when someone's following them around all the time? And it's like when you have a 2-year-old and you're just like, I just want to go to the bathroom. That's all I want to do. Just by myself. Just give me 5 minutes by myself. But think about it. Think about when you were little. What made you comfortable? Was it a little blankie? Was it a stuffed animal that you couldn't go to bed without? Shadowing. Shadowing is saying, you're my security blanket. You're my safety. And when we can teach people that this is an honor, it changes everything in terms of how they look at it. It's a depth of love. It's a depth of trust that we didn't have before. We have to understand that their reactions change. Whoops. And so I'll give you a couple of examples here. My mom loved the show Jag, and my mom believed that as the disease progressed, that Jag was real, that was our political environment. And so she was always very savvy about politics. And so she started getting really upset and angry with staff when they did not know what was going on with Jag. And so staff could have termed her reaction as a behavior. They could have picked up the phone and called the RN and said, we need a PRN now. Get the doctor on the phone. Dorothy's out of control. But you know what? They didn't, because they knew my mom, and 3 staff that worked the floor together agreed that every week one of them would watch Jag, and they would log it so that all staff could have a conversation and keep my mother calm. When they called and told me that, I started crying because I thought, they get her. They get her. That to a family is everything. We have to communicate with them in detail, in positive ways. Now, some communities will say, okay, we'll incorporate that. We won't just call when the bad things happen. We'll call because Charlie tells his joke every breakfast and we always laugh. It's the same joke, but he gets so much joy out of it. We feel his joy. And so we're going to call families every Friday at 10 o'clock. I said, it's not going to work. They're like, what do you mean it's not going to work? I said, you're making it a task. A family is going to expect that call every Friday at 10, and the day you miss it, you've let them down. You don't care anymore. Something's wrong. You need to make those calls when they happen, or as close to when they happen, because your voice is going to be more authentic. And that's where we lose things, is when we turn them into tasks. We have to teach people environment is important. So another time, I was cleaning out my mom's closet, and at this time, only red could be in her closet. Everything else she didn't own anymore. And so I was cleaning out all the other clothes, and she started breaking down in tears. She was just fearful. I mean, she was almost shaking. And I said, Mom, if you don't want me to clean your closet, I won't. She's like, no, it's okay. It's okay. But it wasn't okay. It wasn't okay because I wasn't paying attention. On the TV, we were bombing Iraq, and my mother felt that that was happening outside the walls of where she lived. I turned that TV off. She was fine in seconds. We have to care consciously. We have to learn that it's not about telling the whole truth and nothing but the truth. We have to learn to incorporate fiblets in order to enter into their comfort zone. It's not about being right or wrong. It's about being safe, happy, and pain-free. It's not about perfection. It's about progress. It's always about moving forward. We have to understand that families may not see what you see. And I'm going to give you an example of that I call the difference between dignity and ego. This is a picture of myself, my mom, and Barbara Lee Friedman, who's a musician. And a friend, Barbara Lee, and another friend, Nancy Chakran, gifted me an hour of time where Barbara Lee was going to sing and Nancy was going to videotape my mom. And my mom only lasted a half an hour, but we still have several great videos on my YouTube channel of my mom singing along and engaging with Barbara. And so one day, every month, I would meet with a good friend of my mother's who for 10 years could not go visit her because she just couldn't go there. And I met her in a restaurant, and just as I was like scooting my butt into the booth and I'm pushing this DVD with this cover on it over to her, the woman who's 76 years old screams out in the middle of the restaurant, "Oh my gosh, she looks horrible, Lori. I thought you were taking good care of her. It doesn't even look like your mom. I'm so disgusted with you. Why have you been lying to me all this time?" I got nervous and I giggled, and then I got the seething eyes that were just burning holes in my body. And then I paused. And then I said, "Thank you. Thank you, Kay. Thank you. What are you thanking me for? Lori, I can't believe you've been lying to me all this time." Kay, I'm thanking you because I didn't know until this moment. I don't see what you see. I don't see that my mom's hair isn't permed. I don't see the billy goat hair on her chin. I don't see that her eyebrows are thicker. I surely don't see her broken teeth that look like a rusted chainsaw with fried rice hanging off them. Kay, what I see is pure joy. I see the glint in my mom's eyes. I see that her eyes are squinted because that's our signature mark when we're happy. I see this big, brilliant smile. I see her dimples. And when I look at that picture, I hear my mom giggle. To this day, I can go out to YouTube and I can be having a really bad day and I can watch a picture of my mom engaging in pure joy in her later stages of dementia, and it changes how I feel about the world. We need to tell staff and families what joy looks like. We need to educate them so that they can find it, so they can see it. Now, I want to give you some other tools here. One I call the hybrid CAR e-giver, and CAR stands for Conscious Awakening of Relationships. And the e-givers is about the emotional giving. The emotional giving is just imperative because it's about how we make people feel. It's not about the tasks we do. You see, people with dementia say we have to be more informed. We have to understand that their stages and symptoms are like emotions. They don't wake up in the morning and just stay in a stage or stay with a symptom, that they are triggered just like we are all day long. So you could pop out of bed, be in a great mood, and you're on your way to work and somebody cuts you off and all of a sudden you're not so happy. But then you swing out of that into another mood because a song comes on the radio. That's how dementia is. They say most of them tell me that they go through all 7 stages every single day, but they don't tell everybody because they don't want to be plucked and categorized in a different stage. They want us to identify the stages and the symptoms, but they say it's not enough. We have to look at the reactions to each, and we have to do that without judging. One of the things that I created is called Your Memory Chip, and this is one of the handouts that you have. And for me, this was life-changing. And I interviewed people all over the world that were giving care, both professionals and staff. And I asked them, talked to them about 3 different things. The first one was, what's the most important thing I want this person to know? For family, it was easy. Typically, it's I love you. For staff, it was simple. We're here to support you. But those words are not enough. We have to use our multisensory engagement to engage. We have to approach in the same manner, touch in the same manner, use the same tone of voice, maybe even have a saying we use that others might not feel is appropriate. So my mom and I, on our comings and goings, like when I would leave, I'd go, see you later, and she'd go, alligator. And I remember people coming up to me and saying, that's not age appropriate. And to that I say, knock it off. You don't know our relationship. My mom has gone back in time, and she probably thinks she's talking to me as a child, or I'm her mother talking to her as a child. Who knows? She's happy. She's comfortable. That is the focus we have to be on. We have to be really careful of what is working and what is not. Granted, somebody else could say that and it might not be appropriate, but we have to be really careful on how we judge and what we say. But it is integral to use multisensory engagement because it allows them to pull in different resources to make a connection with us. I also asked people what they needed to focus on, and I was really happy because, of course, professionals had a job description and care partners like myself had a list. And I thought, oh, I'm really good at a list. And then about 2 months later, I woke up from a dead sleep, sweating, my heart was pounding, and I thought, oh my gosh, how did I miss this? And what I missed wasn't a word. It was a twang in the voice. A subtle twang that said, this isn't how I pictured my life. And what I realized in that moment was that as a care partner, I cannot care for somebody and make them first and foremost if I have an emotional need, even if it's an unconscious emotional need. So I had to switch that. I had to switch from being task-oriented to kind of going down to Maslow's theory at the very bottom and look at, was she safe? Was she happy? Was she pain-free? And that became the priority. And that made me adjust how I did my tasks. In fact, I found some tasks I didn't need to do, but as a family member, I had them down there because it made me feel like I was doing something for a disease I was told nothing could be done about. I found that I could let others in to help because it wasn't about me having to control. It opened my eyes that everybody can bring something different to the plate as long as it's a safe relationship and they feel safe, happy, and pain-free. It allowed me to sit and have a conversation instead of jumping from task to task. These things are critical. The other thing I found was families a lot of times were so afraid they wouldn't remember the person who was. And we have to help people engage and capture those moments. We've got our phones with us all the time, taking video, taking snapshots, writing poetry. There's so many different things we can do to capture. But when we use the memory chip, when we focus on being safe, happy, and pain-free, we shift from task-oriented to being a care partner. We stop demanding and we start coaching. We stop relying on our authority and we rely on the goodness of our decisions together. We stop looking for issues and we find possibilities. We stop saying I and we become inclusive and say we. We don't disempower, we empower them. And we find that we are less stressed and so are they, which creates us being way more grateful. Now, oops, your memory chip is also, oops, my computer's going crazy. Okay, I'm really not doing this. Well, anyways, your memory chip journal is also on there, and that is something you can encourage staff and family alike to take a picture, write a few words. It doesn't have to be anything major, and be able to share that. And so it can be relived, it can be reminisced. You also have a bunch of helpful tips in terms of communication. If anybody wants this, we're more than glad to get this to you in a PDF. You can download that. Feel free to reuse any of these. We have also been told to live in their world, but to that I say, it's our world. And if we're really going to be a team, we have to start saying our world instead of just stepping into their world, because it has to work for both sides. We have to not just care, but we have to learn to consciously care. We have to remember that, anyways, I believe we only remember 3 things in life, and that's the tears, the fears, and the joy. And again, this can be applied throughout life. So the tears are for things that we feel we've lost and we're grieving. And we can get sucked down into this whole depression of grief. And grief is something is good. We have to process it. But if we start teaching people that you can't have great grief without first having great love, then it helps pull us up. It helps us appreciate what we had that so many people never had. And the fears are for all the planning that we do and the worrying of what could be. And we lose a lot of time planning and worrying about things that never happen. And it's good to have a backup plan, but do you need 50 of them? It's more important to be fluid, because even if you have a plan, you're still going to adjust it, because by the time it happens, you're going to have a different energy level, a different skill set, different resources at hand. And just believing that you will do the best you can in the moment you have with the knowledge you have. And understanding that joy can only be found in the present moment. It can only be created, and it can only be identified in the present moment. So of these 3 things, if you want joy, you have to live in the present moment. You have to still experience both sides of the tears and fears, but you have to be really conscious. We have to understand and accept that emotions aren't good or bad. They just are. It's our reactions to them that get us in trouble. We have to share our knowledge. We have to realize there's no silver bullet. We have to let both staff and family know about dementia friendly. What is that? And, what's that mean? And how do they get involved? And really, dementia friendly is just about doing things deliberately and ongoingly to enable people dealing with dementia to feel safe, supported, and welcome. Nothing different than what any of us want. It's not about my way or the highway. Scotland, if you're looking for resources, just put them in. You will find all kinds of information. The Alzheimer Society, Australia is doing some great things out there. Dementia Action Alliance is doing some wonderful work out there. The U.S., I was able to launch with the Lutheran Home Association, the first dementia-friendly community in the U.S. in 2013. This is new. This stuff is really, really new. Roseville, I still to this day believe, is the only city that has dedicated a page on their official website for Alzheimer's resources for our dementia-friendly community. Colorado is doing some really great work with Cindy Lazinski out there. And of course, you've heard about Dementia Friendly America that's popping up and really getting things up and going. There are resources for family and for staff. Maria's Place, if you're looking for engagement and activities, it's free. They will give you a shopping list. They will show you how to modify it for different progressions. It's amazing what they have on there. Dementia Mentors is a great tool as well. For people who are newly diagnosed, they can be hooked up with someone who's been diagnosed, who knows what it looks like and feels like from the other side. There are groups on Facebook. Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts are getting involved. There's choirs. There's hospital programs. I've got the radio show and dementia chats and quick tips. There are so many resources out there, and we have to utilize them. I'm going to wrap up with one last story for you, and then we can get to some Q&A. And the story is about Betty the bald chicken. Now, this story came to me in the middle of the night, and I'm old enough now to know that I have to write it down or I'm not going back to sleep. Now, Betty was this chicken, and she had this great life. She lived on this farm. She had a wonderful family and friends. She was connected to her community, and life was good. Life was really good. And one day, Betty went out into the barnyard to have dinner, and she was nibbling on her corn, and all of a sudden she felt this tug and this pull on her shoulder. And she looked around and she thought, well, what the heck is that? And there was nobody by her, but it was like somebody pinched her. And she couldn't figure out what it was. She realized none of the other animals noticed, but she did see that one feather had fallen. But she decided she's not going to tell anybody about it. She had that kind of feeling in her gut things were going to change, but she didn't know what. So she just kind of let it go. And life continued on, and life was brilliant. Until about 3 months down the road, she went out again to have dinner in the barnyard. And this time, when she was eating her corn, she felt a tug and a pull, but this time it hurt, and she squawked out in pain. And when she squawked out, everybody looked at her, and they had fear in their eyes, and they were angry, and they were scared, and they were pulling back their young and pushing her away. And when she bowed her head down, she saw feathers were all over the ground, and she saw that her body was bloody and pockmarked. And again, she didn't know how this had happened. But from that moment on, Betty was no longer invited to be an active member in her family or the community. People abandoned her. All the other animals just pushed her off. She was so sad, and she was so scared, and she one day decided to walk the outskirts of the farm, and she just decided to pray and ask, what's wrong with me? Why are people so scared? Why do I look like this? I'm a good chicken. And she's crying, and she's walking, and she tripped on this rock, and she tumbled forward. She ended up falling off this cliff into this big ravine. And as she's falling and screaming, she's thinking, no one's even going to know I'm dead. Nobody cares. No one's checking on me anymore. But what Betty didn't know was at the bottom of the ravine was a whole nother population, a whole nother community called the Caring Corral. And they heard Betty's cries, and they ran out to catch her. And they embraced her, and none of them asked what was wrong with her. They just wanted her to get better. So they nursed her back, and Betty was feeling much better. And they finally said, Betty, why don't you just stay down here? And Betty decided, you know what? Nobody wants me up there anymore. I think I will live down here. I love being with all of you. And so she lived down in the ravine for a couple of years, and then she got really sick. So the Caring Corral gathered around, and they decided somebody had to go back up to the barnyard to talk to the other animals. So the horse gallops up, and he gets all the other animals in the farm around, and he says, you have one last chance. Betty's dying. Are you going to continue to pity and push her away? Or are you going to come back into her life and celebrate all that Betty has been? Now, if we're honest, we've all been Betty. We know what it's like to not fit in. Too tall, too short, too fat, too skinny, too rich, too poor, too whatever. And it hurts to not fit in. If we're honest, we've all been a barnyard animal where we have turned our back on somebody in need because we didn't have the time, the energy, the money, or whatever to give them. We were just tapped. And I know you're all part of the Caring Corral today because you showed up. And for that, I thank you. You see, it doesn't make any difference who you are, even in this moment. It's always about the next moment. Who are you going to be? I believe each of us can make a huge difference. I believe that we can help people come to unity through community. And I don't know what's going on with background noise here. I'm hoping you guys aren't hearing that. And I believe that we have a choice to make. We can look at this peacock as something abnormal and scary, or we can see the beauty in it. And with that, I'm going to close. So thank you so much.
Lori, this was wonderful. Wow. I'm so inspired. There were so many things you said, and what a passionate speaker you are. And I wrote down so many things about words matter and your reaction equation, the empowering model that you talked about, and all the resources and stories you provided. So we have a question up here. As a family member, what is most helpful and meaningful to talk about in the quarterly care planning meeting staff?
Okay, I'm sorry you cut out on that one, and for some reason I'm not seeing anything screen-wise here. So
yeah, you probably won't see it. So let me try that again. So as a family member, when you think about quarterly care plan meetings, what is most meaningful and helpful to talk about when family members are going into the care plan meetings?
oh, great question. Really, so often we focus on kind of this medical model of, the medications, the behaviors, the things that are going wrong. And I think we really need to focus on the relationships, the comfort, how to increase that level of comfort, how to communicate with them better. What issues are they having? I remember when my mom was in the care home, and they asked me to actually head up a family council, and they said, we just can't get this off the ground. And one of the things that I heard from families over and over was they were so frustrated with communicating. And they were like, well, I told a staff member, I talked to the nurse, or I put it in the box, but no one's getting back. And so at these meetings, we would have one director of a department each month, and they fixed, and the solutions that came out were just incredibly fast and empowering, but they felt heard. So I think it's about letting them be heard, asking them for input on, what can we help you with? What are you seeing the needs? Not being afraid, of what they're going to say. But really, because sometimes people just need to be heard. They don't need to be fixed. They just need to vent, because a lot of times they can't even talk to their family about these things. They're kind of the lone soldier in there. So I think it's really about being heard and then helping provide support and opportunity for them to be involved, and educating them on different ways to communicate and engage.
So is that something that, just a follow-up question to that, what can staff do to really equip family members for a successful care plan meeting, especially when it's an adversarial situation? I mean, when things haven't gone so well, is there a thing on the staff side? This one was more on the family member side, but on the staff side, is there something that staff can do to better equip the family member?
Well, I think with all of this stuff, especially, if you're having some conflicts there, is we have to, as staff, not look at it as a battle of wits. And sometimes that's what I would see. Not just with my family, but I'd hear it from others, where everybody walked in, in their armor. And I think to really help families, just ask them to make a list, write it down, so that you've got something concrete to really be able to address. If you're asking them for an agenda of what their concerns are, not only will that help guide you, but if you're addressing them one at a time, now there's no denying that you've addressed it. Where sometimes we just let people get in and they ramble, but nobody's really taking notes and following up. And there needs to be that follow-up. And there needs to be that connection of, and a lot of times there is one staff that gets along with this family member and then the rest of them don't. Raise that person up, pull them in, work as a team with that, identify who's got the best relationship to be able to communicate with this person. And so often we just leave it up to, well, no, it's this person's job. Well, if that person can't do the job that needs to be done because of personality styles or whatever, then we need to find another way. And again, expand the team, in my opinion.
So here's another question. What are examples of ways that your mom continued to have purpose, and what can team members do to help find purpose for elders?
Well, when my mom first moved in, they had a choir, and she was part of the choir, and oh my gosh, she loved that. And they went around on a monthly basis and they sang songs. It was like a caroling group basically, except they did it all year long. Loved that. Absolutely loved that. She had great relationships with staff, and I think that she viewed them as friends, because they didn't come off like, even when she went for a walk, she was going on a walk with friends. It wasn't because it was time for a walk. It wasn't a task. It was like, hey, Dorothy, do you want to go with me when I go here? She was just being included in something. Teaching families and staff both on how to engage is really important. I'll never forget one time, and I'll just share a quick story. I call it the VOA day, and my mom was living at Volunteers of America nursing home, and they had a spa day. And I went to pick up my mom, and she looked gorgeous. I mean, she looked like a 16-year-old in love. She had her favorite red outfit on. She had jewelry. She had makeup. Her nails were done. Her hair was done. She had her purse, the whole 9 yards, and she was beaming. You can just feel that. And so she tells me the story about spa day. I bring her to Red Lobster where we're meeting with our family. My whole family sees Grandma walking in, and they all stood up from the table and were like, Grandma, what's going on? And my mom goes on to talk about spa day and says, there was music and hors d'oeuvres and dancing and laughing and all these different things. Chris did her hair, Bobby did her nails, and just all these events that had happened on that day. And I said, Mom, what was the best part of the day? And she says, oh, it was the whirlpool tub. And I said, but Mom, how did you get in the tub? Because my mom couldn't even lift her foot an inch off the ground. And so as family, naive, we're picturing kind of the dolphin lift, and they're swinging her in. And my mom is picturing somebody massaging her shoulders, the bubbles bouncing off her body. She's got a cocktail in her hand. Someone's painting her toes. There's music in the background, and there's a candelabra. And she tells us all, everybody deserves a spa day at the VOA, like it's a 5-star hotel. And what I took from that was that sometimes we think we have to create these big events, but both staff and family can engage in smaller activities that feel purposeful, that feel relationship based. So for me, I always had a small bottle of lotion, so I could massage her hands or shoulders or legs, arms, whatever it was. My daughter always went with nail polish so she could do Grandma's nails. Now, my brothers weren't touchy-feely, so we got a CD player and they could push the button and play some Frank Sinatra. But my mom got great pleasure and felt purposeful in every single one of those. She felt validated. She felt valid in her life. And so, communities, even just having small bottles of lotion that families can grab just to give them something to do. For staff to be able to show that this is a meaningful activity, to be touched, to be told you're there, taking pictures of one another. There are so many things. It doesn't have to be a task that they're doing a job. It just has to be something that makes them feel alive and purposeful and connected. And I think sometimes that's what we forget. It's deeper than just a task, if that makes sense.
Lori, that was beautiful. That was really well said. And I think you've, as somebody who's done dementia care for years and years, you've given me even some new things to think about. So, Lori, I just can't thank you enough for being a part of us. And for those of you who are on the call today, I want to let you know Lori is going to be one of the speakers at the Dementia Symposium, May 18 in Little Rock, Arkansas. And there is information on our website that you can get about registering for this. And you'll be able to hear Lori among other speakers. And Lori, I look forward to hearing more of those stories. So thank you so much for your time today, sharing your thoughts.
Well, thanks for having me. I love sharing my stories, and I love learning from my audiences as well. So take care, everyone, and I hope to see you at the conference.
I'm sure you will. And just to let all of our listeners know, we've got a few more webinars coming up in the month of February, all on memory care. We really are kind of focused right there on kind of building kind of our appetite, whetting our appetite for more at the Dementia Symposium. But February 6th, we have Memory Care Deconstructed Part 1, Practical Pathways to Dementia Inclusion, kind of building on more of what Lori has said. Part 2 is Memory Care Best Practices from the Provider Community, and this is with Dr. Jennifer Carson. February 27 is by Dr. Emi Kyoto, founder of Ibasho. She's going to talk about design and dementia and really looking at designing for those with dementia as a human right. All of these sound to be very provocative and sound to be very exciting for those of us who are really working to build those quality environments and communities for those with dementia. We've got workshops coming up. We've got 8 workshops this year. Beginning in February, we've got one in Washington, D.C. We've got April 1 and 2 at, well, actually, we've got one at the Woodlands in Pompano Beach, March 25 and 26. Warwick, Rhode Island, April 1 and 2. And we're going to Longmont, Colorado for the Hover Greenhouse Homes, June 10 and 11. All the way out to Vancouver in June. Londonderry Village, we will open the 2 homes, making it 300 homes for Greenhouse. Will be there in August in Palmyra, Pennsylvania, and the Tome Rivertown neighborhood in Detroit in September. And last but not least, Lifespan Network in Columbia, Maryland. There's a link for you to register. We're looking forward to seeing you at one of those workshops where you can learn more about the Greenhouse Project. Thank you, everyone, for spending part of your day with us, and we look forward to seeing you on a webinar coming up soon. Take care. Have a great day.